Great. Hope you guys feel energized and grounded for the rest of the day. Um, right now, I would like to call on stage Mr. Tanguy, who is one of the co-founders of Astungkara Way. If you are a Green School parent, you're probably familiar with the organization already. They are doing incredible, innovative work in regenerative agriculture. Tanguy is such an amazing guy that was one of the first people to give us a warm welcome to Scale Climate Action in the early days, in early discussions, and is doing incredible work. And one thing that Tanguy has that is really, really interesting is not just that he's working on the ground, doing very impactful work here in Bali, but also has an impressive tech background and impersonates these exact theory that we think that we can bridge tech lessons into impactful uh, climate work. So please, a round of applause for Tanguy, and he's going to be talking about future of food. You're welcome. Let me open this up.
So just asking about the clicker because my presentation is super animation heavy. Yeah. So does it work? Yeah. Just before starting, maybe I'd like to thank Amber for that moment. I think that's my first time speaking after a group meditation, so this feels really nice, really really awesome. Thank you for that. So let's see. Can I just do a try? Should be the central button, right? Oh, was that me or you? Okay. So we could go back one. Uh, let's see. Hey. Okay, great. Okay, I'll give it a try. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Sure. Yep. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again, everyone, for coming this morning. Thank you, Skill Climate Action, to give me the opportunity to share this presentation, this short presentation. I'm going to try and make it short as well, with you all this morning. So my name is Tanguy Yu. I'm from Astungkara Way, and without going too much into Astungkara Way, I just want to express how Astungkara Way is connected to this topic today, right? So Astungkara Way is perhaps quite well known for the Astungkara trails that we organize. So we've created the first walking trails across the island of Bali. And the specialty of these trails is that they connect um, uh, all the points that we walk through on this trail are communities that are engaged in regenerative action. And a lot of that regenerative action is connected to food. So it can be, community of farmers who are working on regenerative, coffee farming or rice farming, or, who set up a composting system in their community. And so one part of Astungkara Way is very much connected to connecting sort of regenerative travel, ecotourism, and also showing the food-related regenerative practices that are already being put in place in Bali. So that's one of the things that Astungkara Way does. The part that I'm personally responsible for is the second sort of big theme that Astungkara Way is working on, which is working with a now large group of rice farmers in Subaku Malambing, so close to here. And we're leading the largest group transition efforts in Bali to transition rice farmers to regenerative rice farming and implementing a system which is called complex rice systems, which is basically bringing back how rice was farmed before the Green Revolution and integrating ecosystem elements to guarantee rice farmers higher yields, lower inputs, of course, no chemical inputs, and especially climate resistant, climate change resilient cultivation methods. So What I do in my work is very much related to food, the future of at least rice here in Bali. On a quick personal level, I'm also a farmer. When I have time, I'm farming with a headlamp at 11 p.m. when I have time. This is my farm in Tabanan, Kediri. When my lovely wife and I got there 3 years ago, it was a very degraded landscape. So my specialty is permaculture design and ecosystem restoration, specifically on arid landscapes, and that's what I spent the rest of my time doing is transforming places like this into what many visitors to our farm call the paradise, right? So pretty much every hour, every one of my waking hours is dedicated to food and to ecosystem restoration and transformation. Okay, so I'd like to start this discussion on the future of food by showing these couple of AI generated images on. I typed in one of those AI image generators like future of food just to see like what is AI going to do. And interesting, we got multiple versions here. We have the future tech version. It almost looks like this is on another planet. It's like, hopefully that's not Earth, Jesus. And yeah, growing in greenhouses. Then we have the future cities, very green, where we have old people, when young people farming in these uh, huge buildings. And then we had this one, and this one particularly caught my attention. And that looks exactly like can't really see it well here, maybe, but it just looks like a normal, like kind of like little homestead farm, like you would see currently, right? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I kind of like that. So we'll see. Which ones of these scenarios is likely to play out. So this is what I'd like to share with you this morning. I realize that perhaps a lot of you already know what I'm going to say, so I hope there's at least a couple of things that you can take away from this morning. So, yeah, hopefully this is interesting for you guys. So, would like to start. Would like to start. I would like to start. Okay. Okay, I'd like to start with the three numbers, actually. That'll be wonderful. Thank you. Okay. I'll start with three numbers. And the first one, yeah, start by not going in the middle as well. The first one is the average age of farmers worldwide, which is 59. In Bali, by the way, the community of rice farmers that we work with, the average age is 58. So yeah, pretty close. Average worldwide age, 59. Okay. Second number is projected population on Earth by 2050, 10 billion. That's a beach in India. And the third number, actually different from the number that you were showing, Renato, is the estimated contribution to greenhouse gases of the global food system. This number is significantly higher than the one that you shared because it includes also some of the supply chain, so the processing, and it also includes the estimated emissions of when land is being cleared for agricultural systems, so up to 37%. Interestingly enough, this number is from the IPCC, and this number 37 does not include the fabric, well, making fertilizers, pesticides, and the transport of food. And there's no kind of official number on this, but there's a lot of expert opinions on what the number is, and it's more likely close to 47, 48% if you take in the whole sort of value supply chain that you were mentioning, Renato, earlier for food. So kind of if we're talking about scaling climate action, if working on food can work on almost like half of the problem, this seems to be a very central issue. Uh, so I think this kind of reassures me that I'm spending a lot of time on something relevant. Okay, so on those three numbers kind of make me think of three questions. The first one is how will we feed all these people, 10 million people? Second is who is going to feed all these people if farmers are almost 60? And the third one is what are we going to feed all these people? So actually, I'd like to start with the third one. Is like, what are we going to feed all these people? And actually, maybe start with what are we already? What do we grow on Earth? This is a quick question for you. So number one, this huge blue bar here. What do you think is the most cultivated crop on Earth? Corn, no.
Right.
Potatoes, rice, no. Sorry? Soy, no. Yeah, interesting, right? No one can guess this one. Like, sorry? Grapeseed, no. The first one is sugarcane. Yeah, we all love sugar. Yeah, sugarcane. And by pretty far, like the second one is quite a lot lower. The second one someone guess it? Second one is corn, maize, right? Uh, third one, we yes, third one is rice, and the fourth one is wheat, and then fifth we go to raw cow milk, right? That's the top five, and then we go to oil palm, potatoes, soybeans, cassava, sugar beet, and tomatoes. That's the order. Interesting, right? Um, sugar. There's a lot of sugar cane. Um, what the first two I was interested in because I was like, what do we do with most of the sugar cane and corn that we go like, I don't eat that much corn. Like, what do we do with all this? Actually, 45% of all the sugar cane that we grow is used to make ethanol, biofuels. And 40% of all the corn that we grow is also used to make ethanol. Um, did a bit of a deeper dive on corn because I was really curious there. And actually, 36% goes to animal feed. So we're not really eating much corn at all. Um, and actually, if we look at the first two, ethanol, like almost all petrol, even the Pertalite and Pertamax that we put in our bikes, contains ethanol. There's about 10% ethanol in all the fuel in all the world. And the rest of the ethanol is, sold as, biofuels. It's a way for countries to reach their Kyoto Protocol targets, which is kind of crazy. So okay, sugar cane and maize, and I'm like, we've grown some sugar cane at Astungkara way, and I know like from a ecosystem restoration background, like don't grow sugar cane; it depletes soils like crazy, right? So I'm thinking, what is the cost of growing all this sugar cane and corn? Well, they require very heavy nitrogen inputs and pesticides. If you plant, corn in your garden, you'll be lucky if you can eat any of that corn. There's a lot of bugs who like corn. So we got to produce a lot of nitrogen and pesticides. But wait, how do we produce nitrogen? Oh, the N in the NPK bags, like when you see farmers throwing the blue or the white pelletized fertilizer, like how do you make that? So I did a deep dive into nitrogen production. It's seems kind of simple. You're taking a bunch of things, water and coke, and a lot of carbon dioxide comes out. Um, and I was looking, what does a nitrogen fertilizer plant look like? Like, oh, damn, it looks like this. This is one in China. This is one in the U.S. Found an article that was saying that very likely U.S. nitrogen plants are emitting 100 more times methane than they are reporting. And this is Pupuk, Indonesia. So this is one of the 37 plants like this in Indonesia that produces 24/7 pelletized nitrogen. You can see there's a train station leaving there to distribute all this stuff. So, okay, like huge impact to produce the nitrogen to grow food that becomes mostly petrol. Um, same thing for pesticides. How do you make pesticides? Then it becomes like super complicated chemistry that I don't understand. But in all the schematics that I saw, there's like this one ingredient, methylamine, that was in there every time. Oh, what's methylamine? And actually, methylamine is comes from petrol. So pesticides are vastly petrol based, right? This is a pesticide factory in China. Doesn't look better. So actually, there's something that I didn't really quite understand, but that I really got when I was working on this presentation. So thank you. Is that agriculture is actually a transfer of energy. right? It's a transfer of energy that is below ground to living beings who are above ground, right? It's kind of an interesting way to understand it. It's like we're taking all these minerals and petrol and energy sources, transforming them into plants, which we then use for energy for our vehicles, energy for our animals, and energy for us. Right? So it's an extractive process that is actually very inefficient in transforming sort of like energy joules from underground into energy joules above ground. But that is the process, right? That is the process, at least, of industrial agriculture. Certainly wasn't the process 100 years ago. But so this is what is happening, and that's how we produce all these things. We got added a few more there. So after tomatoes, we have barley, bananas, chicken meat, pig meat. Quite a lot further. I thought that'd be further up. So this is how we produce all these things. So okay, that kind of we could spend a lot of time on this, but that kind of answers the question of what do we feed all these people? What are at least what are we growing for all of these people? Um, and the answer is, well, we're feeding these people a lot of fossil energy. That's like if you think about it, right? So the second question is, so how will we feed all these people? Um, and I think there's two paths. I went on YouTube and I was like typing the future of food, future of farming, and there's really wonderful documentaries about these super high-tech futures and these, autonomous tractors that are, or robots that can pick cherries or plant strawberries or whatever. And like, okay, there seems to be like there's a very technological driven, you know, future vision for agriculture. And you have also people who are more working on traditional methods, like reviving traditional systems of agriculture, like we're doing. Like the solution is what they were doing 50 years ago. So it seems like there's really a crossroad there, where like, for example, I saw a lot of stuff about well, for example, rice cultivation and how can you mechanize rice cultivation? We saw rice was pretty high up there. It was third, right? And actually, if you think about it, sugarcane and corn are mostly used for other things than eating. So probably the most cultivated eaten crop is rice. And there's no near moment where a robot is going to be planting and harvesting rice. So I kind of wanted to explore this and looking at the technology side of things. And if we do go the route of technology, we're going to need a lot of engines. Like a lot of these things that I saw were about having these powerful engines, a lot of machines. So engines or electricity, whatever. If they're electric, then we're going to need a lot of electricity, a lot of energy, still more energy going into agriculture. And so I don't want this to become like a sad, scary thing, but it's just kind of real, sharing with you what I found. And so I was looking at energies like, okay, how do we power engines right now? Like, what is the part of electric engines in the world? It's actually 0.2%. The rest is diesel, gasoline, and those dreaded biofuels. But diesel and gasoline, yeah. Okay, diesel and gasoline, how long is that gonna last? And so I was led to this really interesting report from the Shift Project, November 2021, commissioned by the EU, looking at how do we transform the European economy. And the report says that peak oil actually happened just before COVID, and is actually explains why petrol prices are rising around the world. It's not exactly related to just the Ukraine-Russian crisis. This is what the report says, is that we've passed peak oil and gasoline prices are just going to keep going up, even after the Ukraine crisis. Okay. And it went a bit further and looked at this global fossil fuel consumption, I think close to what you were sharing. This is where we're at. And the METS group, which released a huge comprehensive study on all of the world's resources, and said that natural gas, coal, and oil reserves will be not likely, they will be depleted by 2065. I'm like, wait. So I had measured the pixels here and I was like, where's 2065? And 2065 is there. So if we're here, 2065 is there, that it's going to be quite a fall. So it's like, okay, maybe petrol is out of the question, but maybe electricity. Maybe we can have electric tractors and electric robots picking strawberries. Um, but how do we make electricity around the world? Coal, natural gas, and oil is this chunk here, right? And well, Med Group just said those are going to be gone in like 40 years. So what is likely to happen is that chemical inputs are going to cost a lot in the future, right? There's also this big thing about the phosphorus crisis. We're going to run out of phosphorus in a few years, like 40 to 50 years. But chemical inputs will become vastly more expensive in the future, which means that naturally grown food will become the norm. Right? If we can't afford chemical fertilizers, we go back to like we do. We use like ducks for their poop and fish and azola for nitrogen, things that produce nitrogen without requiring factories. The second thing is transporting food between countries is also going to cost a lot, which means that localized food production becomes the norm. Um, Too bad, I really love kiwis. Um, and food prices in cities also goes up because it becomes expensive to transport food to cities, and also growing food in cities becomes expensive. So a lot of people return to the countryside. Actually, the head of the Shift project, who's a famous physician, ended his presentation at the European Commission by saying the only future of humanity is to return to being small-scale farmers. That was his last sentence. Um, so this is what might happen: natural, local, and a lot of people in the countryside. So I think from this crossroad, this high-tech future, perhaps it happens for in some places for ultra niche applications, maybe for very high value crops. But it seems like the natural farming direction is kind of the direction that we're likely to head into. And I think that this is hope the main gist of this presentation, which is like local, naturally grown food is not an alternative to industrial food. It is the future of food, right? It is the only way, just from a resource standpoint. It's not an opinion, right? Just from a resource standpoint, that's how we produce food. And okay, maybe it's not 2065, but let's say, in 100 years. Um, we go back to how it was before this crazy petrol-based era that we've known. This parenthesis in human society, human civilization. So we'll go back to this number. So again, finishing on this is if we're talking about scaling climate action, and if we take into account fertilizers and transport, we just saw that that's probably a pretty big chunk of greenhouse gas emissions. Then thinking about food, working on food seems to me to be a very, very central issue to work on. And I think that in our daily lives, we kind of find it like, oh, nice, we're going to buy some organic stuff, and like, oh, let's support some local farmers. I think we don't measure the importance of what is happening right now with projects like what Haley is going to talk about with regenerative farming, with what Booya is going to talk about with composting. It's really starting the process of going back to relearning to work with nature, right? And maybe we have one generation to do this. There's a lot of examples that we could talk about here. This is my last slide. It's things like regenerative agriculture to reverse soil degradation, things that we need to look at, because in a few years, when all those people leave the cities and go back to the countrysides, there's not nice numbers about soil degradation around the world. So if they leave the cities and go back to the countryside, but the soil is dust, it's not going to look nice. So regenerative agriculture really is at the core about restoring soil so that we can grow in the future, converting waste into resources, and also using climate change resilience agricultural practices. And interestingly enough, we have these things down here, which are actually some of the 12 permaculture principles. Maybe some of you recognize them. So, for regenerative agriculture, catch and store energy, produce no waste, climate change, creatively use and respond to change. I added these because the permaculture design manual is 594 pages, right? It's it's um it's a design science that is so comprehensive, from biology, physics, chemistry, climatology. We have sciences now that allow us to work and um, to feed the planet with natural nature-based solutions. This could be a whole other presentation, which I'd love to do, about like how we are going to feed the planet with small-scale regenerative solutions. And there are a lot of people, doing the numbers and saying, yes, it is something we can do. There's so much land on this planet that can be used to do this. And we have sciences like permaculture, which is one of our great tools. And I want to end. Sorry, that was my last slide. It's just to get a couple more minutes. This is the synopsis of the last chapter of the Permaculture Design Manual, chapter 14, which is called "The Strategies for an Alternative Global Nation," and it has themes like ethical basis of an alternative nation, um, uh, village development, effective working groups and rights livelihood. There has been work on this. We have keys, to make this a possible future. But as Renato was saying, this is big. It requires quite profound changes. An alternative global nation. Like it sounds like a big plan. So it's great to see everyone out here, and hopefully people willing to help to make this happen. But yeah, it seems just from a resource standpoint, we have one generation to do this. So there you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thanks. Just one quick question, and we will all have a chance to mingle with Tanguy afterwards. I hope, at least, that you guys will be around. Um, I think you mentioned that you have a whole another presentation to talk about how to expand this and scale this globally. So we will wait for that one, and we will bring you back to talk about that. But what would you recommend for everyone here to do? What could be their first step towards supporting this kind of thinking and practices?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm repeating just what a lot of other people have said. I think especially quoting Bill Mollison, who actually wrote this book, the Permaculture Design Manual. And he often said the biggest thing you can do for climate is to grow some of your own food. To start growing some of your own food, even if it's one salad per week that you're growing. There are so many related impacts that occur when you do that. Of course, not having to go to the shop and the plastic and the transport and everything, but it's also the psychological transformation. Yeah, most people here have families, so your kids seeing food growing and not thinking like carrots grow at the supermarket. So yeah. Anyway, crazy. There's crazy numbers about this. Like in the U.S., like 7% of kids think that bacon is a plant. Like kids below 8 can link to that study. It's nuts. So I think that yeah, for me that would be the number one thing. Grow some of your own food, especially we're in the tropics, and the climate is very very helpful for that. There's so many ways you can grow just some of the food that you eat, and that will start the journey, I would say.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. So big round of applause for Tanguy.